Yo, Dietrich Labbers, it's time to talk field quantization again. But this time, we're going to do a slightly more sophisticated problem. Last time I talked about field quantization, I talked about quantizing a real scalar field. But in this video, I'm going to talk about quantizing a complex scalar field. The calculations are exceedingly similar, although they are somewhat longer in most cases. However, the nature of the theory is strikingly different. There are two main differences with this theory. The first main difference is that there are two kinds of particles present. Immediately, you see that the set of harmonic oscillators is larger, and you can construct a Fock space that is much larger by applying this expanded set of oscillators to the vacuum. And then also, you notice that the Lagrangian has a new invariance as a result of the fact that the scalars are now complex. It's a global U1 invariance. And there's a conserved Noether current associated with this invariance and a conserved Noether charge associated with that conserved current. And when one calculates this charge operator and applies it to energy eigenstates, one finds that the eigenvalues are of opposite sign for the two different types of particles, which means that they're of opposite charge. It's totally consistent to interpret this type of charge as electric charge, and also it's totally consistent to interpret these two particles as a particle and its antiparticle. So you can use systems of this type to describe matter and antimatter. This really is the key important property of complex scalar field theory. You can describe scalars of opposite charge, and therefore scalar particles and their antiparticles. So now that you've heard me talk about this epic theory, this souped up version of the last one we did, well, now you can enjoy the technical details in the following math segment.
The Lagrangian density for a complex scalar field is given here, where phi bar is the complex conjugate of phi. As a result, they must be treated as independent fields in the Lagrangian formalism. Given this Lagrangian density, the equations of motion are these. So we see simply that both the field and its complex conjugate satisfy the Klein-Gordon equation. Also, the canonical conjugate fields can be computed. If one takes the following to be true, we have a relationship between omega, the time component of this k vector, and the spatial components, and the mass, where this k vector is the momentum associated with these plane waves. One finds that the following two phases satisfy the Klein-Gordon equation. One can construct the general solutions to the equations of motion by taking arbitrary Lorentz invariant linear combinations of these phases, which gives us this. In the real scalar field version of this problem, A of k and B dagger of k had to be Hermitian conjugates of each other to ensure that phi of x and t is real. Now that we are looking at the complex case, A of k and B dagger of k are completely independent. One can then apply time derivatives to get the conjugate fields in terms of the same Fourier coefficients. We arrive at this result. Now let's quantize. The set of equal time commutation relations can be expanded to account for all of the fields in the theory. It's pretty intuitive. You have one set of the standard 3 from the real scalar field problem for the field and its conjugate, and then you have these two commutation relations on the bottom, which says that the two sets of fields are independent, meaning they commute with each other. The fields must be upgraded to operators in order to satisfy the top two commutation relations. Looking at the formulas that we have written out for the fields, we see that the Fourier coefficients must therefore be operators because everything else is necessarily just a number. We can now invert the formulas for the fields and their conjugates, and then use the above commutation relations to work out the commutation relations of the Fourier coefficients. The first step to inverting the relations between the fields and the Fourier coefficients is to evaluate the following four integrals. These ones, we're going to compute them. Although because we already have an integral over k in these fields, when I actually do the integral, I use k prime here as this momentum variable to avoid getting the two confused. When we plug in the value of phi, we arrive at this. We can break apart those phases in this interesting way, and then use these formulas to evaluate the integral over x. Then from there, we can use these delta functions to evaluate the integral over k, which gives us this result here. Now that the integration over k is done, there is no reason to keep the prime marker on the other momentum variables. So the final answer is simply this. Now we can do the same for the phi bar field. So coming back here, we'll do this integral in exactly the same way. It proceeds in exactly the same way. We substitute the formula in, break apart the phase factors, use these integrals to do the integral over x, and then we do the subsequent integral over the k's with the delta function. Now again, we can drop the prime once the integration is done, because we've integrated over what we were calling k. Then we can do the same thing for the pi of phi field. It goes exactly the same and yields this answer. Then we can do it for the pi of phi bar field, and it gives us this answer. So then the complete set of those integrals that we needed to do are given here. Then we can do a little bit of algebra and trivially identify these as the inverted relations. Then we can start commuting them in order to get the answers. The first one I did was a of k and a dagger of k prime. Then simply applying the various commutation relations we already know for these fields. In the integrand, those equal time commutation relations, we can arrive at this result after a little bit of simplification. Then we can do a similar calculation for the commutator of b of k and b dagger of k prime, and we get exactly the same answer through essentially exactly the same calculation. The rest of the commutators you can make out of these various a dagger and b dagger operators trivially evaluate to 0. Therefore, the complete set of them is simply as follows. With these commutation relations established, the energy states of the system can be worked out. First, the Hamiltonian must be computed. Then the above established commutation relations for the Fourier coefficients can be used to work out what the energy eigenstates are. From Noether's theorem, we have that the Hamiltonian density and Hamiltonian are given by these formulas. Then we can insert the value of these various fields and simplify down. So the first thing we can do is we can multiply out all these products and then combine the exponentials. Then we can split up the exponentials in a different way to make doing these integrals easier. Now we can apply these integral relations to do the x integration, which gives us this messy result. Then we can use the delta functions to do the k prime integration, which causes it to simplify down. Also, I canceled the 2 pi cubed in here because there's one in the numerator and the denominator. Now, remembering the various commutation relations for the Fourier coefficients established above, as well as this relation, we see that the Hamiltonian simplifies down to this. Next, we can apply these commutation relations to get the Hamiltonian in this form. Then infinite and finite shifts in the 0 point of the energy scale cannot be measured, so the last term can be ignored. Doing this gives the normal ordered Hamiltonian, which we have here. Normal ordering is formally defined as positioning all a dagger and b dagger operators. Later we will see that these are creation operators to the left, and all a and b we will see that these are annihilation operators to the right. Doing this yields more sensible quantum physical expressions, given that the ordering of classical fields is arbitrary, and the original Hamiltonian was computed by inserting quantized fields into classical formulas. One can see that the ordering of the quantum fields is ambiguous. Taking the normal ordered Hamiltonian as the correct one can therefore be viewed as simply taking the only available ordering that doesn't yield nonsense. Also, notice that Hn is Hermitian. With the normal ordered Hamiltonian, the spectrum of energy states of the theory can be computed. The first step is to work out the meaning of these 4 operators. From this, one can see how to build the energy eigenstates of the theory. Now let's work out the meaning of those operators. First, we will study the A operators. Let us consider an energy eigenstate here. We haven't figured out how to write out the exact form of an energy eigenstate, but we can still postulate the existence of one and understand it to have this property and use that to study these other operators. Specifically, if we just apply the Hamiltonian directly to this state here, consisting of A of k applied to this energy eigenstate we've postulated, and then work through a bunch of algebra applying the various commutation relations we understand the Fourier coefficients to satisfy, and then simplifying, we find this result. An essentially identical calculation gives the same result for this B of k operator. Therefore, we see that A of k and B of k are lowering or annihilation operators, as mentioned above. They remove a quantum of energy from the state that they act on. Now we can perform a similar calculation to find the meaning of A dagger of k. So we apply the same Hamiltonian to this state constructed by applying A dagger of k to this postulated energy eigenstate. And again, we mess around with the commutation relations that we established above for these Fourier coefficients in order to work it down to something we can simplify into a nice understandable result, which is given here. An essentially identical calculation gives the same result for the B dagger of k operator, so we have this here. From here we see that A dagger of k and B dagger of k are raising or creation operators as mentioned above. They add a quantum of energy to the state that they act on. These operators are called harmonic oscillator raising and lowering operators because of their very similar properties to those in the famous harmonic oscillator Schrödinger equation problem, as one can clearly see. From here, a few important realizations can be made. First, because Hn is an integral over a sum of these two products, its expectation value must be non-negative, clearly. With this in mind, because A of k and B of k lower the value of the eigenvalue of the Hamiltonian by one quantum, there must be a lowest state that gets zeroed by A of k and B of k. So we have these two statements. This ground state will be taken as the definition of the vacuum because it has no quanta of energy left to be annihilated by either annihilation operator. One can then interpret these energy quanta to be particles. In this case, spin-zero massive particles of two different types because we are quantizing in massive complex scalar field theory. With this interpretation, one can see that field quantization has had the following effect. At a given frequency, only discrete energy levels are allowed, and they correspond to different integer numbers of particles, field quanta, of either type being present at that particular frequency. Basically, the states of the theory simply correspond to a vacuum containing some number of massive spin-zero particles of various frequencies. One can act on the vacuum state with the creation operator to populate it with particles. A one-particle state can be written in the following way. In fact, there are two different options because we've got two different types of creation operators and two different types of particles present in this theory. We can write a complete spectrum of multi-particle states as well, where we apply an arbitrary number of these creation operators of either type of particles, and we're going to denote that in this following way. Because the creation operators commute with each other, these field quanta obey Bose-Einstein statistics and are bosons. The 0 point on the energy scale is set such that the energy of the vacuum has the value 0. As a consequence, we have these relations here. Also, it is instructive to compute the momentum. According to Noether's theorem, when considering invariance under spatial translation, the momentum density and momentum are given by these formulas. So then we can plug in the values we established above for the various fields, and then start simplifying. Multiplying these out gives this result. Now we can do the x integration with these formulas, which gives this messy result. But that's okay because there's some simplifications. This 2 pi cubed cancels with a factor of 2 pi cubed that multiplies all the terms in this factor in the numerator, and also you can use all these delta functions to do the k prime integration, which ultimately gives you this. Then you can simplify further by recognizing that some parts of this expression are actually vanishing integrals. Specifically, this integral here has an integrand that is odd in k, so it vanishes and we get down to this, and then we can rewrite this using commutation relations like this. Then the second integral, this one, also has an integrand that's odd in k, so it vanishes, ultimately giving us this beautiful result here. With this formula for the momentum operator, one finds that this operator does just give the momentum as its eigenvalue. With this done, there are only two things left to do, and the first is to introduce the number operators. We have them here. Now the number operators have an interesting property. They simply count the number of particles that are present at a given momentum of a given type. This is easy to show by commuting A of k or B of k to the right until it annihilates on the vacuum. Their eigenvalues are called occupation numbers. The only thing that there is left to do now is to figure out what the difference between the two types of particles is. It turns out that they have opposite charge. Specifically, the Lagrangian of the theory has global U1 invariance, given by this, so we see that Lagrangian is in fact invariant under that. From this, we find the following conserved Noether current here. Associated with this is a conserved charge, which can be associated with electric charge without inconsistency. This is the integrated Noether charge. It's the conserved charge associated with this current. It is this operator that will reveal that the two different types of particles in this theory have opposite charge. First, let's express this charge in terms of the raising and lowering operators. We can plug in the field values we see in there, and then simplify down. We can use these integral formulas to do the x integration, which yields delta functions, which allow us to do the k prime integration. Simplifying ultimately gives us this. Normal ordering then gives the final result here. In this case, the normal ordering, or equivalently ignoring the divergence from commuting the b operators in the second term, is justified by the second argument from above. Specifically, given that the ordering of classical fields is arbitrary, and that the original Hamiltonian was computed by inserting quantized fields into classical formulas, one can see that the ordering of the quantum fields is ambiguous. Taking the normal ordered Hamiltonian as the correct one can therefore be viewed as simply taking the only available ordering that doesn't yield nonsense. Now for the key result from this calculation. Remember that the number operators just count the number of particles of a given type and a particular momentum present in a given state. The charge operator therefore shows that the two types of particles have opposite charge, because their associated number operators appear in the charge with opposite sign. It is this result that allows one to interpret type A particles as particles and type B particles as antiparticles without inconsistency. Specifically, one can write these eigenvalue relations. This completes the analysis.
Okay, so now you've seen all the technical details of quantizing a complex scalar field theory. You've seen the expanded set of oscillators. You've seen the commutation relations they satisfy. You've seen the Fock space you can build out of it. And you've seen that the two different types of particles that arise from this expanded set of oscillators have opposite charge and can be used to describe particles and their antiparticle partners. You've seen that there's a new global U1 invariant in the Lagrangian, and that by calculating the Noether current and computing the Noether charge, you can then express this as an operator that then tells you that in fact these two different types of particles do have opposite charge. You've seen all this epic excitement, all this epic exciting math, all in the form of a beautifully cohesive and complete quantum field theory. I hope this helped you love quantum field theory more. I hope it helped you understand it better. If it did, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. Dietrich out.